I would like you to watch what I'm doing, and I'll also explain as I'm doing it. So if you have any question, you can raise it. We'll pause, we'll talk about it, and then we'll move on. So I just create a new folder and call it travel sites. So let's start with the first thing, which is index.html. And I noticed that it's not just one site. I noticed that it comes with a couple of sites as well, like other pages as well. So I'm gonna put the site up as an image instead of as PDF so that we can preview it, and then we'll move on from there. So I'll put this one inside here. So this is now available. This is what we are designing. Okay, so let me go with folder structure. Or before I start defining folder, let's start getting things done. I'm gonna do a preview. Okay, I will still also have to get a visual representation of what's going on. So we've already done the top, so I'll be fast doing the top section since we've achieved that yesterday. So let's go ahead and do the top section. So I have travel sites, then we have our body. We go in with a div that says we have another div, and this div has a class so that we can have our logo section. We did this one and call this travel sites, such that we can then have here is just going to be our UL, and we can do our LI and our A tag. From here we have Hawaii, then we have Iceland, then we have Greece. Let's do Flexbox. So we'll be doing flex. Okay, so before we start, you will notice that the site itself starts from center. There's a content section on the site. So if I introduce the site here, for example, you will notice that it starts from, there's a space before the travel. You will notice a pattern right here. And then if you look at the last thing on the Greece section, you also notice that there's a line, not really a line so to say, there's a pattern. So there's a gap in the left hand side and the right hand side. So you have to be consistent in leaving that gap there. So how do we create something like that? So you have to be able to center a section. So I'm going to call this one, we'll call it head section. We're not at the banner yet. So I want to do a content section. I want to call it a name. I want to center an item. So let me give you an example of what I mean. So let me come to the bottom and do a div and say hello. So let's now start introducing style. So I'll call this style.css, and let's bring in the style.css inside here. So we have our link, we have so that we can then do, so let me just call this contents. So if I come in here and do contents, so that you see that the stuff is showing, so let's pick it right. So what I want to do here is to be able to make sure that my content is starting from here and then also ending at the other end. So what I want to do is I want to load this with a lot of contents. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to put some gap before and some gap after. So I have to do margin auto 80%. Okay, so this is what I was trying to do. So I was trying to have a space. If you notice, the travel site didn't start from the extreme edge. You didn't notice that? And then the Greece didn't end at the extreme edge. So what I did here is a way to make sure that our travel is not going to be sitting at the extreme end. and your grease is not going to be sitting at the extreme edge. That is what this container, is for. So this is to contain our content. So this is just going to be a class for content to make sure that our content fall in between a specific range. So whenever you call anything content, it's going to be falling inside here. That's the work of this one here. So we can have something like this. So there was no specific width, but when you deal with websites, normally you will notice that there's I think it's around 800 pixels or 780, that you normally have. But since you are dealing with you don't want to, the user might reduce the screen to something small. So look at what happens when I reduce it to something small. It's still readable, right? Based on the fact that it's 80%. So it still makes sense. So I don't know, you guys have not gotten to responsiveness yet. So that's another thing for another thing. Now we now have a container, even though if you look at it, the 980 looks so small. So then this one needs to be 5. I can't explain, it will take me a long time to explain this. That's if you understand box model, that's what is happening here. The box model thing is happening here. So I will just ignore I won't explain for now. Or let me just try and explain. Width 90%. Everything is 100%. When you say width is 90%, then what happened to the left and right? You say left and right, one of the left will be 5, the other right will be 5. That's why if you add it together to give you 100%. So if you try to mess with this, for example, it will go out of line, so it will give that scroll effect. So that's how I got to this. We have this perfect view. Okay, so let's go. This becomes the content. Let's now go to the view. Now I will put my header here, header section. We will still style it, but we're not styling anything now for the header section. But because we want to make the travel site app, show in between, so we need to put another class inside this. We need to put this inside another class such that we can then make it inside our container. So I can do div.container so that we can then put all this guy inside here. So if we do this, okay, that's content. So container is better. Let me call it container instead of content. So it should be called container. So let me remove this one. So you can see that our travel has this, nice beginning, and by the time we do the grease, it will end at the other side of the table. What's Flex all about? It's about arranging item in a pattern, horizontally or vertical. So that means you are dealing with content. And when you are dealing with content, it means there's a parent container, and then there's a child, the content or the item you are trying to move around. So that means you are working with two elements. The first element is the container. Don't look at this container we defined here. Just ignore this container. The first element, they call it parent, element. And the children is what you are trying to play with. The children is what you are trying to move around. There's always going to be the parent container. So now that you have the idea that there's going to be a parent container and the children is what you are trying to move around, we will then introduce the parent container. This container here, the work of this container is just to make sure that this item falls in between here and ends somewhere around here. So we need to deal with the container itself. So let's go ahead and create that container. I'm trying to look for a name to call it. So I will call it flex container. So let's go ahead. So we need to create another div. So all this guy will now sit inside here. So we have our container. Remember, the work of this container is just to have this place end and start there. And the second thing we have is flex container, and the flex container is going to put this guy in flex position, meaning it's going to make them flex. So let's style this guy that is a flex container. Let's go and style it. So we come here and we do our display flex. So immediately you do that, it starts displaying them in flex pattern. What this does is just to give you an idea of what's going on. So this one here, we know that this travel site is logo. and this side is we've not given it a name. That's just what is going on. I always keep this around sometimes just to show you what is going on, like to have this, pictorial view of what's happening. Okay, so what we need to do is we can go ahead and give this guy a name because we're still going to use it. So I'm calling it nav. Now the next thing we need to do is to be able to tell the flex that we want to justify our item. We want our item to be placed in such a way that one will start in the beginning and the other one will end. And where do we do that? Under flex container. So there's a property called justify content. This justify content is how we want our content to sit. So we will use, there are several options. There's space around, which does not depict what we want to do. Remember, what we want to do is the travel site will be on the left and this other menu will be on the right. So there's space around, there's space between, which is what we want to implement. There are other ones. Space between is what we're going to use. There is space evenly, so we're using space in between. The next thing we want to do, we did this one the other time, we did them inline, and I guess that was straightforward. Let's quickly implement it. So we do our nav, and we just said that the nav.li, what should happen to it, the display property should now be inline. So when we did inline, we then say that there should be a space on the padding left. You can just say 10px. So that gives that space there. Notice something in your travel site is in the middle. It's in the middle with what is going on here. You can also put in the middle is sitting on top. There's a way to also put it to stay in the middle, and that's to align the item. Where are you going to do that? Under the flex container. So you go to align items, and again there are different ways you can align the item. So I think is center. So once you justify center, look at what happened to your travel site. Is properly aligned in the middle, and this guy is also doing well here. So the next thing we want to do, I think this is fine. Let's move on to the next thing, and that is the banner section. So we've covered the head section here. So straight to banner section. Banner section. So what we want to do here is, first of all, let me just give it let me check what we have here. We have somewhat an orange color, but very light. So we'll have that going on there. So let's implement something like that as well. Supposed to do padding. Okay. So notice another thing again you have here. If I go ahead and start typing my text, what do we have here? I have traveling comes with endless discoveries. So I say, okay, so if you come here, notice that the traveling is starting from beginning. And the reason why it's starting from beginning is because the reason why it's having small distance is because of the padding. But of course, it should follow the consistency of our container. So what does that tell you? Number one, I'm going to remove the padding I have there so that the container can properly sit inside it. So we then put this inside container. So this our H1 is supposed to be sitting inside container. Now notice another thing we have in the design that we have here is also a flex thing going on, right? Because the same way we did on the top, we're going to implement the same flex behavior here. So but before we implement that, let's write out this story here. Don't let your dream be just dreams. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to put a paragraph. So now I have this all sorted out. Let's go ahead and let's do the button. So you can use your button anyhow you want. You can do, let's see what they said there. Get started. So we can do get started, and I can have a class and call it button so that I can style the button the way I want it. If I open it, okay, I've not opened it. So we have the images. Okay, I have Grace. I have the hero, so it's called hero. So I have the picture there. So let's start creating folder. So I create asset folder. Inside the asset, I'm creating images, img, so that I can drag this hero and put it inside image. That is done. Then I can reference it inside here. So you can just see that I just dump everything in that place. I'm gonna work on this now. I'm gonna put everything in their right place very soon. So what I'm about to do is I want to group this into two divs. The first div is gonna be, remember I did A and B. So I'm gonna make this A and this image B. Like I'm gonna have the first one that contains the words while the other one contains the image. So I'm gonna create them in a div. So this one here with the button is gonna be in one section, while this one is gonna be in another section. So that's what I'm about to do. So let's go ahead and achieve that, and I'll give it a fancy word and say text banner or banner text, so that I can put all this textual information inside that section. And I'm going to tell you why I'm doing that. Then the next one, you can actually leave the other one like that, since there's no other thing contesting with it. Now you ask me, why can't I just implement flex on it like that? Remember the definition for flex, how flex works. Flex works in the fact that you need to have a parent element and also the items you want to flex with, right? So in this case, I want to flex with two items. Even though they are a lot of items like this, you have travel, you have don't let your dream, and then you have getting started. I want to see them as one. Then the image, I also want to see it as one. So that's why I'm grouping them inside a giant element here, a big div here, and then this one will be another div. Then what will now be parenting them is what I'm going to flex. That's what is going to happen here. So let's go ahead and do that. So you can see the two elements. This is the first element and this is the second element. So the first element is starting from 23 to 30, while the other one is 31. So what that means is I need to have a parent that reflects them for me. And the parent is, I'm going to create a new parent that the two of them are going to sit inside, so that I can then flex the two items. And remember what so you can see that the item are now flexed, right? They're on the same line, but of course the asset is very big. So you need to deal with the assets being very big. So how do you reduce that? You can just specify weight, and you can just do percentage, 40% or something. So you can just, work with percentage. Okay, so we have this way. The next thing you can do is, you can see that it's forming, is, falling to shape. And I think just the settings as it is now, it makes sense. So look at the item breaks when you have booking A. That place you have booking a vacation, so you need to break it from here. So that's where you can do your BR booking. You can then do your BR will now make sense here. So that will do that. The next thing we want to style is, what are we styling now? We are styling the color. So okay, now the next thing I want to do is let's put some coloring to it. The logo has some wonderful colors. So we then do the same thing H1 here. So just to make sure that all your H1 doesn't look like, but it doesn't matter, let's just style the H1 like that. So you can do your H1. Okay, so the next thing we have is this text here. So the text looks smaller, so we can use the fact that we have banner text and concatenate it with a paragraph to give us this unique look. Font size maybe 11. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is the button. So let's go ahead and style the button. We already gave the button a name. and that is b.button. So we know that the background of the button is orange, that is orange, and we know there's going to be a padding around, padding top. Okay, let me do 10, 20 px. This one is more like yeah, 20. Then we do border radius. Oh, let's try 10. Let's do 15. So let me see what I have here. So I think it's smaller, a little bit smaller. The font size should be smaller. Then I have the top is too much and the color is white. Or maybe we'll reduce this one for it to be too small. Then there's too much. We need to create more space there. Okay, so the rest are cosmetics. So I think we are good. Let's move on to the next thing. So you can get the proper color in there. Let's move on to the next thing. So we've been able to achieve these other parts. So what you should note is notice there's no space from here to here. It's tight. You need to create a padding, you know, from here to here to give a space so that it can breathe a little bit. Look at the one that it was in the example. There's a space, you know, that it can breathe in. So let's do that kind of feature, and that can be implemented under that's the banner section. Let's go and start the banner section. So let's do padding 20 px, then 0 px. Okay, so let's do 30. So you can see the space on the top, and then you can see at the bottom. Let's do 40. So it has given us that top space and the bottom space. Let's move on to the next thing. The next thing is for us to be able to have the recommendations. So the recommendation is in a white section, which is also going to be flex, by the way. It's also going to be flex. But look at the difference between the recommendation. Recommendation is starting in the middle. It's not starting, it's not following the travels. If you look at the alignments, it's not starting from the left. It's not sitting where the recommendation is sitting. He is just, you know, in the center of the entire site, right? So you need to be able to replicate this same feature here. So how do we do something like that? How do we approach something like that? So let's go ahead and let's start that. You can see the two things we've done. They're just sitting there. So you can easily do something like this. And this one I can call it, okay, body, let me call it body section. So these are our body section. So our body section has a title. So I can call it our H1 or whatever. So let me give it H1. It looks more like an H2. So let me call it H2. So I will do H2 recommendation. So you have your H2 sitting right there, and then we want to start, but your H2 is not sitting. If you see your H2 now, it's starting from the beginning, which is not. It's supposed to be aligned with all this one, and what makes it align is the container. So we need to put it inside container. So our H2 needs to be inside container. Let's also color it. So what's the default color, which is this? So let's say comma H2. We can change the font later. Now the next thing you want to do is, now that you've put it inside container, while it's inside container, you want to start putting this other item, these three items. You want to, you know, display them. Remember, they are going to be inside Flex, and for them to be, what's the rule for Flex? You need to have a parent item, and then the children, which is going to be all these three things. So the parent name, we already know what that one will be. The parent name is going to be Flex container, while the item is just going to be the three images here. We're going to bring in the three images. So I'll just bring in the assets, these three guys. So we'll bring in, I'll put it inside this place. So let's bring them in. So which one is first? Well, you can arrange that one. Grace. Oh, they did something interesting. Look at what they did. They put the name under it. So Hawaii Iceland first. Hawaii, Iceland, and Greece. So let's see what happened. Of course, we have a giant image, but that's fine. Let's reduce it, and we can just do that by specifying width, or you can write CSS. Guys, let's do CSS. So alternative text can be the name. Let's write CSS to reduce the size of the image, so that we don't code everything. And how can you use CSS to do that? You need to have a way to reference this item here so that we know what it is. Let's go and let's use all the images inside body section. So we'll come here and say everything body section that has an image, the image should have a width of 200 pixels. So let's give it a try. So this is 200 pixels. It looks perfect. It looks like the size of what's there. Can you see that? Now, obviously, the reason why it's showing like this is because the way the default flex handles things. Look at the way the default flex handle things. It moves things, like this. This is spaced within. I think that's the name of the flex that we call this one. Remember when we did create the flex property? It's called space between. That's why. So it says have a space between. There are other ones. So we're not going to use this flex container. So we're going to change this the flex that we're going to use to create this one, because this flex container is for space within. So for proper naming, I'm going to duplicate this and call it flex container SB. Look at it, flex container XB. That's what I'm going to call this one. And I'm going to call this one what's the one to I want to look at. Let me see the option to put everything in the middle. So we have space around, we have space between, and we have space evenly. Okay, yeah, center is more like it. So center is more like it. Don't worry about the space. We're going to force a space in between. So center is what we need to implement. So of course it has messed up with all this one. So I'm going to call this one -C. So this is flex container C. That's flex container center. While this flex container SB. So all the places that we use flex container should then be changed to flex container SB, which is space between. So I'm gonna go and change all this and say space between. Whereby where we now have this one, we will now call it center, so that we can then have something like this. Then how do you have that space that you have here? How do you create that space? We can style, you can use padding, or you can use gap. So there's also gap settings which you can use to specify the gap that you want to have inside each item. So if you come here, remember this FC here, you're dealing with the one that has with center. So there's an option called, there's a parameter called gap. Then you can specify the gap that you want to apply. So immediately you say 10 pixels, you can see the gap is implemented there. So if I size this should be more of like 30 or 20. So let's give it a try. So if we do 20, so is it looking like it? So I think it's 30. So that's that, but we're not done yet. The next thing we have is that we have the name, and look at the edge. There's a curved edge on each of them. They are all curved, right? So the edges are curved. So we'll curve the edges, and then we'll put a background. We'll put a shadow. We'll curve the edge and we'll put a shadow. So how do we put that? Let me go to the code. So it's good that we have a style that handles all the images. So we can come here and do border, or radius rather, border radius. Border radius, let me do 10. 10 is too much, let's do 5. So that's 5. Then we want to put our shadow. So to implement shadow, we use box shadow. We come here and we do box shadow, and you then implement. It has some parameters in terms of what it takes, but let me just put some parameter and see the output, then we tweak it as it comes. So this is this color. Of course, you can reduce. I think it takes another parameter again. This is more like the intensity. So the last parameter is the blur effect. Like if you want it to blur, and yeah, let's do EF. So this should be like 5, 4, 4. So blur should not be too much. Okay, we can just move on from here. Let's move on. The next thing I wanted to do, what's the next thing on our agenda? Let's go. Okay, now let's add it. So to add it, right, I need to obviously put the text in. I have to put the text in, but I will show you something. Now, if I put the text in, do you see what happened with the text? The text is also now recognized as what? As an element, right? And is following the order. It doesn't care that it's not an image. It's following the text, but that's not what we want to do. But let me just put it to you like that so that you see it and you see how we are going to fix it. So let's have the Iceland as well, and let's have the Greece. Remember what I told you about the fact that because you want to deal with Hawaii picture and Hawaii text as one, you have to group them together as one element. You want to deal with Hawaii image and, or rather, Iceland as an image and Iceland as a text as one. You have to group them as one. It has to be seen as one under Flex Container C. It has to be seen as one. If it's seen as two, this is the result that you get. But this is not the result you want to get. So what do? You group them as one. So you put them inside div, and that's one of the major interesting thing about div. It allows you for proper grouping. So look at what happened now. We've been able to group this as one, and we repeat the same thing. We repeat the same thing here. Then what is happening with my keyboard? I'm just pressing nonsense. Okay, so we put this as this. Okay, now, yeah, it's still not what we want, but at least now we can style ice or style Hawaii or style Greece separately. So we put it inside a span or something, right? We'll put all these guys inside a span so that we can target it with CSS. So let's put it in a span. I'm not putting in a span or in a div. I don't even know where to put it. Let me just put it in a span. So I do the same thing to this guy. I do the same thing to this guy. Okay. Now, do you know that now this item has now been, this now is one item. So I want to be able to adjust the positioning of this item. I want to be able to adjust the position of this item to fall inside here. Let's do that. So how do you target that guy? How do you target this? Because we're targeting span. We want to target span, and look at, there's a pattern. There's a pattern here. There's this, and span. We did, there's something like that. We can target the span and shift them into maybe by 10 or something, and shift them into this container. So what I did here now is that I want it to make sure that it's when an item has a div and has a span that it should worry. So just to make sure that our code is gonna be called, I'll just color it so that you will see what's happening. So we were able to target div span. If there's something else that is inside there, it won't worry if it does not fall into this. The positioning of the item, positioning, absolute. So absolute gives me these effects. we'll continue. Let's go ahead with this. So if this one was let's say 80, then okay, so let's go ahead with this. Let's now give it the styling. So it's showing white and bold, white and bold. So font color white, then font weight bold. Okay, so we have this sorted out. Not really, not necessarily. We have this crazy space that is going on here. Crazy space because of this relative. Absolute, we closed that space for us, but our text is nowhere to be found. So this solution is not elegant at all. No way. We'll come back to this. Let's move on so that we can finish what we are doing. So let's go to the section. This one is pretty straightforward, very straightforward. Let's go ahead and quickly implement it. So again, I just minimize the section so that I can have a clarity of what I'm doing, and I will go there and do we'll just call it footer. We can put footer section just to be consistent. And in this section, of course, it will also have a container div, but we notice that there's a color. Of course, the color will be added to footer section color. We'll color this section. So container, we do div container. Just say hello here. Then I can come to this section and style this one in such a way that it will have background color to be orange. Yeah, padding. Is it okay? Padding on top and bottom alone. So there's a number that we used. I want to make sure that's what we're using here. Okay, there's it here. But we can implement the same thing here. Okay, so which color of orange do we use here, sir? Okay, this is the one we used. So I can just implement the same thing here. So we don't need to worry about this one for now. Okay, so if you trace the line, our hello is starting here. Let's see what they did here in the own section. What they did, I don't think this is supposed to be aligning here. It looks somehow. This is not properly aligned. I think there's a mistake. It's supposed to align with, but that's fine. It's supposed to align with the text. Let me see what's happening here. Okay, because as if they create a new content section for the recommendations. Like it's properly centered here. Normally, it's supposed to continue from this grease and end like that. It's not supposed to have its own defined internal section, but that's fine. So what that means is like you have two containers. There's one container that we'll be using up, so we'll do container 2. And both of our second container is such that we can be consistent with here. You know, we can use that method to be consistent here. But let's maintain container, the normal container, and use this method. So we're gonna do this one, this one, this one. This is gonna be also a flex, right? So this whole thing here, contact email info, is gonna be on one div. The hours and the rest is gonna be in one div. Social media is gonna be in one div, so that you have 3 items that you can flex together. So let's go ahead and quickly do that. So I come inside this one and I check out contact email info. Can use H3 contact email, then I do info@email.com. So this whole thing here is a bunch. It's one single thing. It's one single thing. Contact email, what I just did now, should be one single thing. And remember that what's the process of having a flex? There's a parent container and then there's a child. So these things are child. This one, this one, this one, they are the children. So what that means is that, let's start defining it. What that means that this needs to be a single item, and to make them a single item, they need to be inside a div. So I can put this one and call it contacts. So meaning this is a single div as inside contact. And remember, they need to be inside, a flex container. So I will go ahead and create the second section, which is supposed to be hours. I will call it hours div. Then I'll just say hours here. Then I will title this hours. For time, I will leave this one for now. Then the last one, I'll call it social. And I will do social here. So I'm not changing the content just so that we can, be fast. We're just assuming that the content are sitting well. But remember that they need to be inside one parent container. We're not using this container for it because this container has its work. The work of this container is to put everything inside, that fixed width. So the next container we want to create is to put it inside flex. So flex container, we can use flex container C. We have two flex container we've created. We have flex container C and then flex container SB, space between. Let's try space between to see if it will fit into our desirable need. If it doesn't, we'll create a new one. So we do flex container space between. So all these guys here needs to be inside that. So they need to be inside here, and immediately they find themselves there, they will align themselves. So you can see the results. So you can see they find expression here. What you then need to do is to see if it meets your requirements. Like I said, ignore this alignment for now. We're going to look at this alignment. So whatever you decide in the container, once you adjust the container, it's going to fit into what you have here. You can always adjust the container. Remember that the container was using 80%. So if you adjust the container to another percentage, it will fit into right. So whatever container we use, we can use that same container here such that it will fit into the right place. So just ignore this one for now. Okay, so we have this here, we have this here. And another thing you need to see is that this one also have a kind of flex going on here. So don't get confused. This one has another kind of flex going on here. In fact, the social media handle also have a flex thing going on here. So which of the flex should we do first? Let's do the social media flex quickly. Let's do the social media flex. So to do that, again, let's look at what is, I think the social media flex is space between. If you look at it very well, is kind of space between that's going on there. So let's bring in the images for the social media. This is the social media handle. Let's see what they call it here. They just say social and then they put in the images there. So we can do our BR just to give that space. Then we'll bring in all the images. IMG, SRC, alert, 30, just call it social media. So let's go ahead and get our handles. So I have assets, images, Facebook. I'm not putting them in a particular order. I'm just putting them as I have them there. So I have Facebook, I have Instagram, I have, which other one do I have there? I have Twitter. So I have those three. The way we targeted the images to give us, a size that we want, we'll use that same method. So I'm going to use class of social to target it. I'm going to go with social and IMG, meaning any image in social, use this, settings. I can do 60px. 60px. So just put gap. Let me have gap in my social. So the Facebook is having its own weird thing going on. I don't know. I don't know why. Let me put gap. Okay, so the Monday to Friday, like I said, under the hours, the three things under the bottom are also flex, right? I think this is to, make you guys understand flex very well. So let's come in here and start breaking down this section. So the section is Monday to Friday, we have time. Monday to Friday. So we have our hours, we have Monday to Friday, we have Saturdays, and then we have this. So obviously the reason why it's looking like this is because there is how do I put it now? The distance, the item you have here is taking too much space. Like the whole contact took this big space. Social media took this big space. All hours that's supposed to have a lot of space is not having any space at all. So how do you give space to other items? How do you give space more to a particular item than the other? And that's called growing. They call flex grow. So you can grow an item like these hours. You want to grow it in such a way that it will take more space, right? Because it has more content. So it should take more space than other content. So you can use the word grow, and what that does is that it grows, and to take more space. So how do we implement that? It's called flex grow. So let's look at the settings that we have here. But that grow has to be specified on the elements that you're using. So which of the element? Hours. Remember, it's hours we are dealing with. Hours needs to grow, so that it can accommodate this. These other social media and contacts are too small, so we need hour to grow. So if we come here, we come to hour, so we need to go and style hours to make it grow. So I'll come here and do dot hour and add something called flex grow. And the number will determine how much it will grow compared to what we have here. The whole thing is looking weird, but so this is default. So when you say 2, it takes the whole space that you have there. So you can have you need to now have specific numbers for the other ones, so that those ones too will also grow to a specific rate. So let me look for a number that will, let me see how I can implement the growing to just fit into the space that you have there without, let me see if I can, not really specify for others. If it will allow me not to specify for others, I can just get away with it. Or else we need to go and specify for, let's specify for others. So we'll have contacts. I think we define contacts. So this should just be 2, so that rest should be 1. So immediately we did 1. Notice what happened. When we said 1, this guy, took his position here, and more is being given to hours now. More has been appended to hours. So you can stop there, or you can go ahead and give social also 1. By default is 0. So if you go to social, you can give it 1. So you now have that information, but it's not plain at all. It's not clean at all. Let me give social. Okay, so you can implement a gap. So we need to implement gap on the footer section so that they will respect themselves. Like, because this one is too close to this one. This Sunday is too close to the social. So we have social for gap. Okay. Then we have social. I need to do flex for social, flex 1. Oh, Okay, not social per se. Yeah, social. Okay, that's what happened. If social grow, now it's going to happen to run with this. Okay, so what I can do, I'm even forcing the gap. The gap is not listening. Let me force a big gap. Oh, okay, the gap is not listening. So let me check why the gap is not working. So footer section, let me check footer section. Because the entire item here on the bottom is the footer section. Okay, it won't apply to gap. So I want to put the gap inside this place here. So I can just say, I want to manually specify a gap now. I want to create a new gap class and say gap 40. Like I'm just creating a new class called gap 40. So I want to style this class. Let's go ahead and do gap 40. Gap. Okay, so doing gap 40 gave that space to social media so that these ones can live. Another thing again, I can change this one because this one the space might be too much. But let me check what we have here. Okay, so you can see here we have some gap. Let me increase the gap to like 70 or 80 or so. So let me say 70. So you can see that gap there. So let me call this gap 70. Facebook is supposed to be height. I think someone just mentioned it now. There should be height. You should use height instead of width. That would have solved the problem. So that will solve the problem for the Facebook thing. If the icon was done properly, it will not give us this problem. Now this screen here, you can see the icon. The icon shows, you can see where it's cut off. Normally, if you are doing an icon like this, you are supposed to provide a proportionate width from the width and height are supposed to be the same, so that when you adjust the width, the height will also adjust. But it was not done that way. It was done this way, which means that if you specify the width, it will not make sense. So you have to now be forced to specify the height. Normally, when you are working with icons, they are supposed to have the same height and the same width. So this is the same with this. So we don't need this anymore. So we use this one, space between. So I can go and implement space between for our image here. This one still needs to align to the right. Okay, so let me use still center, and I think this works for us, it being the center. So we now have this properly aligned to the edge, and it matches the content that we have there. You can see the help that the border gives us so that we have a visible display. Let me remove the borders and see where we are. Checking if we have other things that we need to implement on the site. Let me reduce the font of this email on the bottom. That's label. And I think the footer H3 should also be reduced. Let's do 12. Let's make it 13. Okay, so we are done with that. Absolute, relative, top 0. Okay, so this is what's supposed to be the position. So the parent is supposed to be absolute while the content is supposed to be relative. So the label here will be relative. Then I can move it around and say start my top from 40. So since I know the width is 180, I can then do minus 180. Half of 180 is, I'll do somewhere between 90 or let's say 100. Then I can go ahead and do my coloring, which should be okay this way. Okay, so I have that sorted out. So let's work with the link. The link is not yet active. Let's activate the link. So first of all, let's give them direction. So this will go to pages which we've not created, or let's say by default the first page goes to index, then other pages will link to their respective pages. So here we have pages slash Hawaii, then the rest I'll call them their name, of course small letter. So now we have those links activated, but those links needs to look like what they are supposed to look like. So I will go to the styling. So our nav LIA should not have underline. So under text decoration should be not. So and our default font or color should just be maybe a little bit darker. And I think the font size should reduce a little bit. Okay, then we need to check the active, which one that is active, by styling active nav. So this is supposed to work for active. So since the home page is the active link, I will do class and make this active so that I can style the active guy. And what we're concerned about is to have a border on the bottom. So I do border bottom, can do 2px solid red. So that becomes what happens in the border. But notice that the border thing is not coming up the way we want it to come up, but that will be fixed. So how do we fix that? We need to check the previous padding that we did under the list. So let me take all this one to where we have the styling for the navigation. Okay, so instead of using margin, instead of using padding, we use margin. We can also do margin for the bottom or padding for the bottom so that to give that distance. But this time around, we can use something smaller. 5 should be okay. And we can make this a 3. So I think the menu system should be good to go. So let's go ahead and create the pages. So we have the pages, which is the link here, and let's go ahead and create Hawaii. Hawaii.html. Okay, I can just duplicate everything I have in index and put it in Hawaii, and then let's click on Hawaii and see what happens. So if you click on Hawaii, it's supposed to take you to a Hawaii page, which is fine. You know, it does what it's supposed to do. So the next thing is for us to be able to connect the dots and put everything where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to start with the title and say this is Hawaii. Then the styling needs to be properly referenced. And that's why you got an error, because the style was not properly referenced. Then the active link should now be Hawaii, which is properly highlighted now. The next thing I need to do is to now is to change this banner section to a giant Hawaii image, which we have on the bottom. So how do we do that section there? Which is instead of it calling it banner section now, yeah, so we'll change the name from banner section to banner image section. So I will go to the style and look for banner section here. So we need to add another one, but this time around, do I need to give it a special different name? No, I don't need to. Okay, let me add the name to it so that it's specific. Or let me just say Hawaii background, Hawaii BG. So I want to put the background of our Hawaii there, background image, URL, assets, image, Hawaii. So let's bring that in, and it should take over whatever is here as the image. Then we want to make sure that it's important so that it will override whatever is there. So if we go to this side, we'll then implement this way. Let me remove this one and see what happens. So, oh, I'm not supposed to be working on index again. We're in Hawaii, so we put all our details here. Now this is the image. The image is showing, but of course the image is too big, so we can resize it to fit in place. Then I will do background size. Okay, so this is our image. I need to stretch it and move it around where I want it. I have it this 100 by 100. Let me try 1000 by 1000. So this is what I get with 1000 by 1000, which is looking closer to what we want to achieve. So I need to also, so that 1000 by 1000 looks okay. That looks okay. The next thing I want to do is to increase the height, but the height will increase by itself. I won't force the height increment, so it will just come by itself. by the time we put in the content. The next thing I want to go ahead to do is to now specify the header section. So that's this part. So this part and is white, is in white. So this is not following the flex. So I will need to put it outside here and say H1 and write my Hawaii outside. So my Hawaii background with my H1 should be white. H1 should be white. Color white. Okay, then what do I do with the content there? I don't need this content anymore, but I need these boxes. I need to create these boxes, these 3 boxes. So let's start prepping for those boxes. So we don't need this image, we don't need all this story anymore. So let's prep for those boxes. I'll just call them boxes. So there are 3 of them. So let's go ahead and style the box. Inside the box, there's a header section. So I'll just do H1 and we have Friday. The other one has Saturday and the other one then has Sunday. So inside it, I can use a list. It's safe to use a list. I can then have a list that has the details. So we have breakfast, lunch, dinner, then snorkeling. So this can then be duplicated into what we have here. So we then need to style this to look like what we have here. This needs to look like this. So let's go ahead and start with the styling. So we already have box we are styling, but I'm styling box in respect to banner section. So I will style my box in respect to banner section. Banner section, and I'm styling box. So I can see that it has a background of white. I can also see that it has border radius. I think 3 should be fine. Then I also noticed that it has well, I won't see that yet. Let's go ahead and put the title, which is the H1, inside as the header inside the box. So inside the box there's an H1 which should have, the color should be black. Then it has a background, or rather it has underline. So border bottom. I think 2px should be fine. Then of course the font is too ridiculous. So instead of H1, so that it doesn't come with its baggage, we can just say header. So that we change the header to, we change this so that it doesn't come with, the styling of H1 already, because H1 already comes with some default styling, so that we have something to work with. Then notice that it is centered. Let's go ahead and put that text centered, alignment center. We also need to deal with, I think we are done. Yeah, this is looking better. So notice that the line is not supposed to touch the edge, so we then need to do padding inside here. Let's do 5px, so that should be okay. The next thing I need to do, I think, is bold. Font weight should be bold. Let's work with the list. We are done with this. Let's go ahead and work with the list. So in working with the list, we need to also style it based on the fact that we are inside a box. So we do UL LI. We start by specifying the background. Of course, we can implement center. We don't need to do border. No need to make it bold. We need to remove the bullets. So we'll remove the bullets. We also need to remove the default margin that comes with lists, and I think that is affected by UL. So there's a default margin I'm adding. that comes with this. So this cleans that up, so we have something like this. Then we can create some sizable space in between, and the font looks too big, so let's go ahead and do font size. Let's try 10. I think 13 should be better. Let's add it here. So let's do background color. Okay, that is too bright. Okay, that is more like it. That is okay. Then let's do space in between the lists. So you do margin top and bottom 0 px 10 px. So that creates a margin. Then we also need to replicate that for padding. Okay, so we have that. Okay, so we need to have a specific width for each of the texts. But before we go there, we can have a size of the box. So we can use, remember that we use a size. This Hawaii has a size, which I think is 180. So we can make the width of each of the box 180. That way it conforms and it looks like this as well. So let's go ahead and specify the width of each of the boxes here. Width should 180 pixels, and it gives us this. So you can see from it's looking close to what we are driving towards. The font size of the header looks smaller. That's the header here. Font size, we can do 13 px, and this color looks lighter. Okay, let me have more padding. Let me make the padding for the box itself 10 instead of 5. So we're looking good. We're looking good. The next thing is to make sure that the Hawaii line up with the way it is before under this section. So it means this one needs to change the way it works. We need to implement what we implemented here. This is space around. It should be center, I guess. So if I go and see what was there for this section, you can see it's centered. Flex container center. That's what we're going to implement here. So instead of flex container SB, we'll use center. It's not responding to center. Yes, okay, I remember why it's not responding to center, because we have different size of the container. So remember that we implemented container 2. So instead of container 1, we use container 2. But this container should end here because of the Hawaii. So this container should terminate here, so that we can have another container that will start up the show, but this time around is container 2, so that we can have something like this. But the problem with this is now that we didn't implement gap. So let me go and enforce gap here. We didn't implement gap here because I discovered that here we didn't implement gap automatically. So we need to enforce gap here so that the system will know that there's a gap. So under flex container, let's go and add gap, or we can just manually create a new class for gap. So we can do gap 10. We did that in the other part. So you can actually create, a new gap and then use it on the fly. So this is 10. I think 20 will look better. So let's go ahead and use 20. So we'll say gap 20. So it's looking like it now. This is more like it. And I noticed there's a space on the way bottom. I don't know why they have that space there. So maybe it has a kind of default height, but let's just go ahead and give it, new space at the bottom. So what that means is that at the box bottom, you need to create more white space. And how do you do that? You just do padding bottom. So this padding is for all the edges. So I can do, we have top, right, bottom can be 30. and end here. So that's the extra padding at the bottom. So it has given us the background that we want. We're almost done with this section. The next one is there's no recommendation for each of the page. So we remove this recommendation page and we are done. If we come here, the recommendation page, we just chop it off. And this serves as the site. That's this Hawaii page now. So our Hawaii page looks like this. We can increase the Hawaii font size here. It looks small. That's this section. This one needs to be bigger. So if I go to this one, container H1, I don't want to style it differently like this. Container H1. Okay, we already have Hawaii there. So we can then do font size. Let me try 20, 30, 40. Is 40 okay? Yeah, 40 is okay. So that then becomes what we have in that section. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to do the other pages, because there are more of that. We need to then do Iceland, we then need to do Greece, and we are done. So it's just from here on is copy and paste, copy and paste. So we have our home page. Our home page is not going through because we didn't get the link correctly. So this link is supposed to be /index to get to index, because we are inside another page now. So let's give it a try. So if I do Hawaii homepage is still not homing. So this okay, so it's working now. So we have Hawaii and then home. The next thing is to do Iceland and Greece. Very simple. We just do copy and paste. So I duplicate what I have here, and we're doing Iceland. And what do I do here on the Iceland page? Let's just click on Iceland. So Iceland is not going. Let's check the reason why page is not going. Iceland HTML pages Iceland. Oh, okay. So there's pages/pages. So inside, when we get to Hawaii, we're already in pages. So you don't need to write pages/Iceland again. You just go ahead and put Iceland straight away. So we can rename that and try it again now. Shouldn't have done that for index. Index needs it. So let's give it a try. So you do home, Hawaii, and then Iceland is working. So we're in Iceland now, but you need to change all the details of what you are seeing there in Iceland. So let's go ahead. First of all, the active page is no longer Hawaii, it's now Iceland, and you need to change the title to read Iceland. You also need to change a couple of things. This is now supposed to be a Hawaii. Then it's not going to be Iceland background, which you then need to go and create the style for. And I can do that by going to my style. So here that I have Hawaii background, everything I've done here, I'm going to repeat the same thing. So to make it, very fun and easy to do, to implement what we have there, I will just use this method here, which inherits from all the settings that we have for. But then there's a problem, because now this is picking the wrong background. So what you can just do is just to implement ice background alone here. So you can implement ice background here. Another way you can also do this is also to implement the background separately and maintain the same setting for the rest. What that means is you will just implement for background, especially for Hawaii, then when you come to Iceland, you will also implement it specially for Iceland. In fact, we can go ahead and then do for Greece right away. We will do that immediately now. So this then become Iceland, and it then automatically pick the picture for Iceland. So we can do the same thing for Greece, and we don't need to wait until we get to Greece page. Once we are there, it will just pick it. Then we need to make sure that we implement the other things that we implement for this. Then this one also needs to be like this. So now we have home, Hawaii, Iceland. Then when we click on Greece, it should also work. But we didn't create Greece page. Let's quickly do that. So we duplicate what we have here and we call it Greece, Greece.html. So what are the things we're changing here? One of the things we're changing is the title. Change the title. Then we change this to Greece background. We also need to change the title here, and we are done. We are good to go. Home and dry. So we just finished. Okay, almost done. The Greece is not highlighted here, and to make that happen, you just copy the style and you come here and you have your Greece highlighted. So once you move on each of the pages, it should change. So at the point, there's one of the page that is wrong here, which is the link here. So the link here is not correct, which I just adjusted now. So it should correct now. So you can move. Okay, another one, Hawaii underwear under Iceland. So under Iceland, Hawaii is not correct. If I go to Iceland, Hawaii is not correct. So you can see the link. It's not correct. Now the link should be correct. Iceland, Hawaii. So that is working as it's supposed to.